Hello there, welcome along to VLGA Connect. Good to have you back with us as we return to regular episodes brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And I hope you enjoyed our special episode last week after Fast Track 2026, tackling the topic of incivility and the threat to local democracy. But coming up today, we're going to take a look back at how one community responded to those devastating bushfires in Victoria. I'm talking about the community of Murrundindi Shire Council, and we'll be joined by the Mayor from Murrundindi, Councillor Damien Gallagher, to see where things are at now and how he reflects back on those pretty awful days at the start of the year. We have news out of the northwest of the state where an alliance of 9 councils is sounding the alarm, in a sense, on what needs to be done to get ready for the major projects that are about to happen there. It's a major boom. We'll tell you more about that. Brent McAlister will be here from Northern Grampians Shire Council. And we've got so much to catch up on with Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. We'll do our best to bring you up to date on recent arbiter decisions and other things that have been happening with a legal perspective from Tony a bit later today. But now let's get into it with a roundup of Connect news since our last regular edition. Hepburn Shire Council CEO Bradley Thomas and Councillor Don Henderson have been served with alleged criminal charges initiated by a private individual, David Penman. In confirming the charges, the council said there's been no investigation or fact-finding process by Victoria Police or a public prosecuting authority. But under the Local Government Act, Councillor Henderson has been automatically stood down while the process is followed. Mr. Thomas is not legally required to step aside and will remain in the role. There have been 3 arbiter reports tabled at council meetings since our last edition that we're aware of. At Wyndham, the Mayor, Councillor Josh Gilligan, has been suspended for 30 days after a finding of misconduct. That has the effect of vacating the mayoralty, requiring a new election for Mayor, which will take place next Wednesday, the 18th of March. More on the implications of that with Tony Raunic a little later. At Knox, Councillor Peter Lockwood has been suspended for 1 month, and Marybeck Deputy Mayor Jay Iwasaki has also received a 1-month suspension. Tony will unpack the key learnings from those rulings as well later in the program. Eddie Contell has been elected Deputy Mayor of Greater Geelong Council to serve with his brother, Mayor Stretch Contell OAM. He'll serve until at least November, filling the vacancy left by Ron Nelson, who stepped down from the deputy role but remains a councillor. Ballot packs are in the mail for the Lockwood Ward by-election in the city of Greater Bendigo. The position became vacant in November with the resignation of former councillor John McElrath. Voting closes on the 27th of March. Mount Alexander Shire Council's CEO has announced he's stepping down after 10 years. Darren Fuzzard will finish up in July, leaving a legacy of stability and heart, according to Mayor Toby Hayden. A recruitment process for a new chief executive is expected to begin soon. Latrobe City Council is calling for a rethink of the new V-Line timetable on the Gippsland line. The earliest morning service now gets to Southern Cross later than it used to, and the council says that's leaving tradespeople and early shift workers unable to start on time. Mayor Sharon Gibson says that first service needs to be tweaked so the region can keep reliable links to Melbourne for work and study. Wodonga Council has renewed its Two Cities, One Community partnership agreement with Albury City, a deal first signed in 2017. The city's mayors say the goal is to tackle shared issues with a single voice, from cross-border services and infrastructure to long-term planning tied to each city's 2050 vision. The Borough of Queenscliff Council opted not to adopt a draft policy about councillors standing for state or federal elections. After a period of consultation on the policy, the council decided to treat it as a guideline instead. Now, councils in the north and west of the state say they need help getting resource ready as major energy transmission and mining projects boom. The Northwest 9 Alliance of 9 councils in the Wimmera and Mallee have commissioned a new impact and readiness strategy declaring the boom could bring thousands of jobs and investment in the tens of billions, but also deepen housing pressure and strain on infrastructure and services. Here to tell us more is the CEO of Northern Grampians Shire Council, Brent McAlister. Brent, good to see you again. Welcome back to VLGA Connect.
Yeah, good morning.
Now, the Northwest Nine, as it's been called, this is not an official name for the alliance, but it's pretty catchy.
Yeah, one of the state government people have dubbed it Northwest Nine, not the councils itself, but it's memorable.
Yeah, it is indeed.
Uh,
So, who are the nine councils involved?
Look, there's six. I won't go through them all, but there's six in the Wimmera Southern Mallee, and then three in the Murray group of councils, and they're Gunnewarra, Loddon, and Swan Hill. So it's
Right.
about 26% of the land area of Victoria, about a third of the state.
Right, and we'll put a map up to show for those watching on YouTube just the scope and the extent of the area we're talking about here.
Mhm.
And we're talking about a number of projects, renewable energy in most cases, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that if they all come to pass, Brent, these numbers are staggering. Nearly $30 billion in economic impact. I think it's around 28, and thousands of jobs. They're pretty extraordinary numbers.
Yeah, look, two sort of key latest trends have come together. The obviously the transfer to renewables. So we've got transmission lines. We've got the Wimmera is particularly windy, so we've got lots and lots of wind projects and solar. But also at the same time, there's been a huge interest in mineral sands and rare earths. So the two overlap. And
Yeah.
so initially the project was all about renewables, but then mineral sands, we said, hey, it's in the same footprint. It's going to have very similar impacts. And so that's why we combine both projects.
Right. So, what your message here is, if I'm understanding this correctly, you've got all these massive projects coming. It's going to have bring a resource boom, but the infrastructure isn't there at the moment to support this, and you'd obviously like to see it put in place up front.
100%. And the experience in New South Wales is that councils haven't been resourced for the first couple of years and haven't been organised. We don't want to repeat that mistake. So the councils, and this is a council-led and initiated project, through some of the work I did in Wellington Shire with offshore wind, we did a similar thing there. So it's council initiated. Vic Grid have funded it, but yeah, the idea is to get ahead of the wave and to have a blueprint going forward over a whole range of things: housing, roading, transport. And anyone that knows Western Victoria is that outside Ballarat and Bendigo, we have very small towns and small councils and financially unsustainable councils in the main. And that's where the issue lies, that we need to be prepared.
So you've brought together all of this information into a package that I assume you're putting to state and federal government. What's the reaction been like in terms of the asks that you're putting to them here?
Look, it's the councils are really struggling. We've had very minimal amount of money from the state to cope with EESs and managing this whole thing. VicGrid have funded this strategy. Look, it's very positive. We've partnered with VicGrid for about 2 years on this. It's taken a little while to get up and get developed. So we're hearing good things, but we haven't seen the colour of money yet. And so the Wimmera Alliance, which is sort of reformed, its main focus is we need money for local government. We need money for the follow-up studies. If you can believe it, the roading and transport and housing impact studies haven't been done. And that's one of the things that's recommended. And the third one is we want some skin in the game around community benefit funding. There's going to be a lot of money thrown around by developers and the government once this development occurs. We don't want to be told what to spend it on. We want a seat at the table.
I'm hearing this community benefit funding message coming out of a lot of councils around the country, not just in Victoria at the moment, as all of these projects start to take shape. What sort of time frame are we looking at here, Brent, for some of these projects to actually happen?
Look, they're long term. VNI West and Western Renewable Link, which are the two arteries that are going to connect the state up to New South Wales. are still 2 or 3 years away in terms of construction. And then, of course, all the wind farms and solar that hang off that are very much dependent on those two arteries. So this is long term. The mineral sands mining activity has been long-winded. Some have gone on for 20 years, and so, but now with Trump and Albanese signing up an accord, there's been a lot of money flow into these companies, so that's happening. But it's not short-term stuff. It's 2 to 5 to 10 years, all this activity.
What's the risk here, Brent, if that investment that's needed that you've laid out here in the strategy is not put in upfront? What sort of things might we see happen that you'd prefer don't?
Look, some of the experience in New South Wales is where there hasn't been investment in housing, because most towns in the Wimmera have a zero rental vacancy, is what the local people will be locked out of all the rentals. They'll be taken over by industry people. And then if there's no housing, then it'll be fly in, fly out, and a lot of the benefits won't accrue. So, yeah, we've got a lot of small towns, and so we really need this investment up front. We don't have big cities like Bendigo, Ballarat, and Geelong who can absorb some of this. We can't absorb this activity without investment.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've laid that out very clearly. Great work going on there. Hopefully the right people are listening. It probably doesn't hurt that it's a state election year as well, Brent.
100%. It's very timely. And so we actually got a meeting with Vic Grid talking about money this afternoon. So we're right onto it, Chris.
Excellent. All right, Brent, thank you so much for your time for outlining that to us,
Yeah,
and
thanks for that.
best of luck.
Yeah, well done. Yeah.
That's Brent McAlister, the CEO at Northern Grampians Shire Council. And that wraps up this week's VLGA Connect news. If you want more news, there's plenty of it 3 times a week on the Local Government News Roundup, Australia's #1 podcast for local government news and views, brought to you by the VLGA. And you can find that on a podcast player, all the major platforms, or head to lgnewsroundup.com to find out more. More Connect news for you next week. Well, back at the start of the year, we had no idea what we were in for, and some communities more than others, as Victoria was hit by bushfires on multiple fronts. And as part of an ongoing periodic series, we want to check in with those communities and see how they're travelling. And it's time to catch up with the Mayor of Murrundindi Shire Council, Councillor Damien Gallagher. Damien, welcome back to VLGA Connect.
Great to see you again, Chris.
Good to have you back. I wish we had better things to talk about. I mean, there's been a bit of space, I guess, since the event, but the cleanup and the recovery goes on and will go on, I imagine, for some time.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's not the 2026 that we all necessarily signed up for, but the organisation, the community have all mobilised really wonderfully, and it's a new reality, and it's one that it's going to be a prolonged recovery. We know that this is the biggest fire that's on private property in the state's history. So Murrundindi certainly feeling the impacts of about half the impact across the state through those 2026 summer fires, and working really collaboratively. We're sort of rely on great partnerships with the community, with our neighbouring LGAs, with the peak bodies, and being able to get us through. But we will certainly walk with the community right through the recovery there, Chris.
We'll come back to, I guess, how the sector has responded and helped you on the ground there. But just paint that scene for us, because I think I'm right in saying that Murrundindi Shire was the most impacted council area in the state from these fire events.
That's right. Just over 40%, is almost half of the impact right across the state was felt in Murrundindi Shire. And the fire started, it's a Longwood fire event that started in Strathbogie Shire, and also deeply impacted. And I think wonderful part of the partnership was that in that immediate response, how well and how collaboratively the local neighbouring LGAs worked. So we were supporting a relief centre when we could for our neighbours, and that Mitchell Shire had set up a relief centre in Seymour for our community members, and Strathbogie was doing the same. So it was the fire didn't know municipal bounds, and so it was wonderful that those boundaries came down when it came to supporting our respective communities. But Chris, I think this journey for us started a long time ago. We've built up some wonderful trust and goodwill with our community. We've invested really heavily in community engagement and development, but we've also invested really heavily in our LEAP program. That's the Local Emergency Action Planning Program, which supports resilience, supports preparedness, and it supports communities, especially through that really tough initial 72-hour period. And so what that's been able to do is enable the community to step up. They step up in terms of event management and asset refresh projects in their very local areas, and also in the emergency response. So when the fire came, when the fire was upon us, the council was seen as an ally and a partner and not just a regulator. And so volunteers are those that stepped in and mobilised. And so we've had in Highlands, in Terrap, in Fawcett and in Yark, the community has mobilised to be able to support their friends and neighbours through those really tough periods. And today is 9 weeks since the fire came into Murrundindi Shire, and those volunteers are still turning up. They're still doing the meals. They're still hosting council and our support agencies to be able to provide that very close support for our community. We talk about a prolonged recovery, and we know that it'll be many years before some people actually reach out for support. So we recognise that we certainly need to be there for the long haul.
Just take us back to the very start. When did you, but paint the picture for us. When did you become aware what actually happened on the ground in those first few hours?
My situation was probably a little bit unique because I was a leader on a crew of a CFA tanker when the Triple O came out. Call we responded, and we were on the tanker, and so we have a very strategic team. So en route to the fire on that very first Wednesday, I was trading messages with Helen Haynes, our local member, about what support might be required in the coming days. I know that our CEO was really active, speaking with, for example, Yarra Rangers and Whittlesea Shire about what initial response and what emergency housing might look like. And so, right very early on, we're well prepared, and I think a lot of it comes down to that strategic focus, but also recognising how important trust and partnerships and relationships are. And so, when the fire comes, we're able to lean into those. And so, very early on, council was asked to assemble a relief centre in Yea, which it did, but that was only very short-lived because Yea then was in the path of the fire, and so that's when we leaned on our partners in Mitchell and nearby shires to support us, and Mansfield as well to the east were a very big part of that.
And as mayor, you're also on the truck, as you said. You're sort of wearing a couple of hats. What about your own property in all of this?
You might actually hear trucks out the front, Chris. There's some demolition works happening for my neighbours who lost a home across the road. They also lost a home. The fire came through our property, but we were very fortunate to have our home saved. And part of that is preparedness, but the big part of that is actually emergency services being able to get here and to be able to support us.
Yeah, a bit of luck maybe involved too.
Bit of luck, bit of good management. Very green lawn and sprinklers going, and we had actually personally had a stay and defend plan. We had all the hoses, we had all the infrastructure all set up to be able to defend. But then having been up there and seen how fast and how furious this fire was running, and we were coming up to that Friday, that catastrophic day, my family decided it was best for us to not be here, which is one of those learnings that I think the community at large has taken on boards from 2009 fires and 2019, 2020 summer fires, is to leave early. So it was, we were defending the town of Alexandra on Friday. It was very much a ghost town, and I've heard it was there's more Murrundindi people in Healesville getting away and keeping themselves safe than in town, which not only assured their safety, and there was only that one tragic loss of life of Max Hobson in Terrap, but it also meant that the emergency services weren't going door to door supporting people out, and it was probably the most effective firefight. And so, as I say, lots of lessons learned about response, and also lots of lessons learned from our community and our organisation about supporting our community through that relief and recovery period as well.
One thing that I thought was very impressive, Damien, was the communication that you kept going for a significant a period of time. You're doing daily video updates on Facebook, social media, etc. That must have been a challenge in itself to keep that information flow going while you're dealing with so many things on different fronts.
Yeah, and look, I've had that feedback, and so it is really welcome feedback. And I must point to the wonderful support I've had from the organisation to be able to do that. But you're right. I think when there's a vacuum of information, that's when anxiety sets in. So we're talking to a lot of people during those communications. So on the first part, we're talking about people who are directly impacted and making sure that we're adhering to the advice warnings. We're also talking to the community about how they can support one another. We're talking to the broader community of the state about how they could provide relief and provide their goodwill over a sustained period, not just for the immediate period. And also we're talking to those people that might come and enjoy our area, that certain areas were continuing to be open. So it was a complex message that was really well supported in delivering, and it's wonderful that people were able to take some information from that.
You got some good feedback from the people on the ground about that information flow?
We were at a business breakfast this morning, and I heard from people who were in South Africa at the time with complete isolation and not understanding like how they were travelling, and so they were able to keep those updates. Also, from people around the sector, had some wonderful feedback at different events of late to talk about just how appreciated it was, and then also the people on the ground that. Communication was a real challenge. So I've been advocating really heavily about hardening and resilience of our telecommunications and our infrastructure, because when those go down, it's really hard to get the information out. So when people were able to connect and they'd say, "Oh well, we've seen the update and we know that such and such is happening, or that these supports are available in the subsequent weeks," that was really important for our community.
I want to come back to that issue of, things that would stand you in better stead for next time, God forbid that it happens. But just before we get off that sector cooperation issue, I know you mentioned your neighbouring councils. We note that there were other events happening around the state as well, but the MAV played an important role in terms of coordinating resources for the various impacted councils, didn't it?
Absolutely, and we can't speak highly enough of our partnerships, but I think that was largely led by the MAVs, that's the Inter-Council Emergency Management Resource Sharing Protocol. So what that meant is that, and I really have to take a hats off to the MAV team, because it does take a lot of coordination. And to give you a sense, we've had about 24 different councils in Victoria have been able to support us with their professional staff. And we've had around 500 days in officer time already in that 9 weeks. So, like Whittlesea Council, we've had 80 days of their support. Port Phillip, Melbourne, well and truly over 40 and 50 days of support just from those couple. But as I say, there's 24 councils, and it's been wonderful to tell that story as well, that they might be wearing a Burundara polo or a Maribyrnong top, but very much part of the Murrundindi team, and it's very much a Team Murrundindi approach, and we've really lent into their support. And if I can go on the spruik talking to the sector there, Chris, we'll be taking a motion to MAV State Council of late, because that's coming up, because we talk about the 3 R's of council, but just we recognise that for an emergency event like this, it's roads, rates, and rubbish, but also response, relief, recovery, and resilience. And so it really is part of business as usual. And we think that the way that the community of local government has mobilised to be able to support that effort, we think it's actually well worth the Victorian government investing in appropriately supported teams that could be put together, or a pool of shared resources, be trained, experienced to lead that response, relief, and recovery effort. Supporting the lead agencies, of course, through the response, but then that relief centre management, standardisation of the methods that are fit for purpose for data capture and management and reporting, which then leads me to another advocacy item that we're considering we'll be taking to ALGA, and that is, throughout the successive emergency events that we've had over the last 5 years, from floods and storm events to seismic events to the bushfires, we've seen the community members have to share their information, have to tell that story, to retell it, and then to relive it every time when they come into contact with different agencies. So what we'd really love to see is some protocols for data sharing, for harmonisation of privacy principles, to be able to support that one story to be told, and then that relief to be able to flow regardless of the agency. So lots of advocacy for us that we're taking to those peaks, given that the lessons that we've learned.
Yeah. And so there's a few of those issues that you've raised, but there are more that I've noticed. There's been a steady stream of requests and observations that you've made that we've done our best to expose through VLGA Connect and the Local Government News Roundup, of course, but that's a local government audience. You've talked about roads, you've talked about firewood collection, you've talked a bit already today about telecommunications. So many issues come into play here, don't they?
Yeah, of course. So you mentioned roads there. 450 kilometres of roads were directly impacted by fire. Unless you've experienced it, it's really hard to describe. But when you've got a running grass fire, the tankers of the CFA can run along beside those and deal with them reasonably routinely. But once it gets into the road reserve and into the timber trees, you get embers fly over your head. And so it really is rather chaotic. But those trees on the roadside also fall over across the road, and then they burn the road surface. They impact on access as well. So 450 kilometres of road to be assessed, to be repatriated, for that roadside to be cleared, and it's an extended period, and it's continuing. I think we still have about 300 kilometres of road to continue to open and provide access for.
How long do you realistically expect that's going to take?
Oh, look, it will be an extended period, Chris. So we've tried to prioritise. So we've tried to be able to support the logistics and getting businesses up and running. We also had the return to school, so we're trying to get school bus routes returning. So then it's most impact assessments and recovery that are going through. And as I say, that will continue over time. But you also mentioned firewood. So a lot of people not only lost their homes or their pastures, but they also lost their firewood stocks, and there's no reticulated gas and that sort of thing. So this is what people rely on for their warmth. We've also noting that all of the fodder stocks and the hay stacks have burnt largely. So being able to support that sort of community. But in terms of firewood, we're trying to treat the timber that's fallen on roadsides on council reserves as a resource. So we've been really successful in securing some funding to cut and to split that timber for collection by people within the fire footprint. So really excited to make that announcement this week, and to be able to provide more information about that program rolling out over the coming weeks, and as we head into that longer, colder winter.
You also, I noted, called for more time for submissions to be allowed to the parliamentary inquiry that's happening into the bushfire. You've had a win on that front?
Yeah, very well supported. So we made that call very early, and supported by our local Northern Victoria representatives in the upper house, but also our local member, and the chair of the committee was also very supportive of that idea of extending submissions. So deep into April, there'll be opportunity for community members to provide their feedback, and there will be an open forum in the Alexandra Shire Hall towards the end of April, where people can come provide their first-hand experiences for what was, as we say, it's the darkest days of some people's lives. But then just to see the way the community's mobilised and being able to support one another, it's very much the Murrundindi way, and we'd love to tell that story at the inquiry as well, Chris.
Excellent. What else needs to be done, do you think, perhaps that we haven't touched on, that could be done better in a next time scenario?
Look, I think we'll rely on that inquiry. And these inquiries, I think, are so important, and they can't be for the sake of it. And so just pivoting very slightly there, we're heading to ALGA with a motion about financial sustainability, and there have been successive inquiries. And so what we'd be really calling on this new House of Representatives inquiry into financial sustainability, that those findings, those outcomes be taken on board, and that we don't have a government response which talks about the current settings which have led to the circumstances we're in. And I think the same goes for this upcoming inquiry, that we need to be able to learn some lessons about resourcing our community, resourcing our emergency services, and to be able to make sure that going forward that those lessons are learned, and it's not an inquiry document that sits on a shelf.
Personally, Damien, is there anything you would do different next time?
I don't think so. I think in preparation, that's where the community is readied, and I'm really proud of the way that, as an organisation, as a community, that we've come together. I really do have to take my hats off to my councillor and executive group as well. Olivia Benazzi, who's the CEO, we're in the process at the moment of renewing her contract for another 5 years. She's a prodigious professional talent, but also in her spare time is a really effective data scientist, and so really effective in telling a credible story. And she's assembled a really great executive team, so a great mix of experience and strong corporate knowledge, but also creativity and energy and new perspectives. And to a person, really well across their brief, and there's really great depth through the management layer as well. My councillor group from the community and by the community, and look, very early in the fire response, their task from me was go out and recognise people, pat them on the back, and tell that story about how we're going to be with them for what we know is going to be a really long recovery. There's no political colours or pecuniary interest in the Murrundindi council chambers, which is really positive when it comes to an emergency response. And look, I also need to recognise our local member in the way that they've made sure that there was no politics around emergency. It was just all in, and it was really wonderful to see that response. And so I think in terms of the culture that we have in the organisation and even with the community is one of no surprises. So we overshare if anything, and it's also one of creativity. So we just won't abide by a response like, that's not what we do here. What we really love to see, and what we do see, is people scratching their heads saying, how can we really make this happen? So I think that preparedness, the way that the organisation mobilised, the way the community's been supported is something I can't speak highly enough of.
Damien, I can only imagine what it's been like for you the past few months. You deserve a break. I hope you're going to get the chance to take one.
Oh, looking forward to a break. But also, it's just, you get fear of missing out. Like, you want to be part of it. You want to be part of the community response. And look, I know a little while ago you spoke with an old mate of mine, Warren Davies. He's been working very closely with our community, and I should say without reward. He's just has a passion for our community. He's been did it sitting there at dining tables, working with communities and individuals about how it's impacting them. And he's as a farmer from Kyabram and had to walk off his farm. And in his words, he's kind of took off his identity and left it on his farm gate. And so he recognises that people are going through those sort of things. And so I really do appreciate the opportunity to be part of the recovery and to support some people through this transition to what is a very new reality. It's not the 2026 or 2027 that we're anticipating either. So I'd to reiterate some of Warren's messages around communication, connection, and courage to seek help, because vitally important.
Good note to end on. And if anyone missed that interview with Warren Davies, it's just a few weeks back here on VLGA Connect. Well worth checking out if you haven't already seen it. Damien, great to speak with you. You're always very generous with your time for VLGA Connect. Wish you very well for the months that are ahead. And let's hope you don't have to go through this anytime soon, if ever.
No, thanks very much for the time and the interest, Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity.
The Mayor of Murrundindi Shire Council, Councillor Damien Gallagher. Well, up next on the program, Tony Raunic is here from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Tony, good to see you online. I got the chance to see you in person during the week.
We did. We caught up for a coffee with a good friend of the show and well known in the sector, Michael Tudball, who's just finishing, I think today, another interim CEO stint, this time to the Borough of Queenscliff, Chris.
Yeah, I got him to just reel off all the places he'd been as an interim in recent years, and I lost count. I think it was 7 or 8.
We need that I've Been Everywhere, man,
we do.
Soundtrack for Tuddy.
He's been checking out all corners of the state of Victoria, but I think he's ready for a bit of a break.
Oh, doing an important job, and interim CEOs do a really critical job. And I'm handing over to Jane Grover now. but a number of identities in the sector doing these interim jobs. Sally Jones as well, I think, is on another role at Bor and critical job.
Indeed, it is. Good to catch up with Michael, and in a lovely spot too, down there in the borough of Queenscliff. Tony, lots to talk about. We need to try and encapsulate this efficiently if we can. Can we get this one out of the way at the outset this week? The rather unusual case where a council CEO and a councillor have been served with criminal proceedings by a private individual. This is happening at Hepburn Shire, and it's been widely reported in the media. In fact, some reporting overnight as we record from the Herald Sun. Now, we should say at the outset, you're a little constrained about what you can say about this matter.
Yeah. Look, I should say on a number of fronts there, it's, as we lawyers say, it's sub judice, it's subject to proceedings, but actually representing one of the respondent parties in this. But you're right, the complaint, the allegations have been widely circulated in social media, and then the written media have picked it up, Chris. So there are a couple of proceedings, actually. There's some Supreme Court proceedings seeking a judicial review of some decisions at Hepburn Shire, and then a magistrate's court proceeding, which is a private prosecution of various people at Hepburn Shire, one of whom is the former mayor, Councillor Don Henderson, and as a result of that private prosecution, he's stood down pending that being resolved.
Getting that you can't say too much, that's one of the things that surprised me about this, that an individual can take this action. It's not been through the police or any sort of public fact-finding investigation, but the councillor has needed to be stepped aside while this happens. Excuse my grammar, I know that wasn't very good. Why is that the case, Tony? This is that particular part of the Act that's coming into play here?
Yeah, well, it's Section 229 of the Local Government Act, which you've seen lead to stand downs at City of Kingston and at Maribyrnong Council in more recent times. And it's a question of whether the instigation of one of these private prosecutions amounts to, charges for an indictable offence under that Section 229. I'm sure the council have got independent advice on that, and that's led to the stand down of Councillor Henderson. But yeah, it's not something I've seen. It's a very uncommon thing, I think.
Yeah.
I think, Chris, and it will be tested by the courts, no doubt, over forthcoming weeks.
Do you think this ultimate standing down of Councillor Henderson in this case is the sort of thing that was envisaged when that particular part of the Act was drafted, or is this an unintended consequence, perhaps?
Not sure. I probably don't want to comment too much on that, Chris.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I say, it's there's been I think a statement put out on the website of Hepburn Shire Council, and it's sad when we see all these things kind of litigated through the press and social media, isn't it? But
it is.
The parties will have their day in court, and I'm confident that they're all prepared to make their arguments, and I think it'll certainly be something that the sector will be watching intently.
Yes, we'll be watching it closely, and again, just noting that there's not a lot that you can say about this matter, but it is one that I'm sure we'll be coming back to at some point. So I want to get on to 3 arbiter decisions that have been handed down since the last opportunity we had to chat in all of these cases at Wyndham, Knox and Merribeck. A councillor has been suspended for a month. In one case, it was the mayor of Wyndham, Josh Gilligan, and what this has meant is that the office of mayor at Wyndham has been vacated as a result of that finding, Tony.
That's right, and that's somewhat unusual, and because if you simply read the arbiter decision, Chris, that's tabled at the council meeting, or at least in the council minutes in this case, if you read that decision, talks about a suspension for 1 month. You mentioned Councillor Gilligan, who's the mayor at Wyndham, and doesn't have any other specific sanction, like is unable to perform the role of mayor or deputy mayor for a period of time. However, given that the councillor who was suspended at Wyndham was at the time the mayor of Wyndham, there are provisions in the Act that say if the mayor at the time has their office of councillor suspended, then that creates a vacancy in the office of mayor that then requires a mayoral election to take place within 1 month. So the relevant sections in the Act are section 20C, which is that a suspension of a councillor who is also the mayor leads to a vacancy in the mayoral position. And then section 26(6) says whenever there's a vacancy in the office of mayor, there must be an election held within 30 days. Councillor Gilligan being suspended for 1 month means that there will be a mayoral election prior to his suspension concluding.
And that is, in fact, scheduled for next Wednesday, the 18th of March, as we reported earlier. There's been some speculation in the media that the vote will likely go along factional lines. There are two groups, it seems, amongst the Wyndham councillors. What would happen if it's a 5-5 vote, as some are suggesting it will be?
Well, it'll depend on the governance rules position at Wyndham. It might be a case of let's all come back and try again, because there won't be a casting vote or anything in that situation.
So they'd need to schedule another meeting.
Yes, they might need to schedule another meeting, unless they've got a sort of a pull out of the hat type solution there at Wyndham in their governance rules. They'll have to come back and have another try.
Isn't there a requirement in the Act, and playing devil's advocate here, that the vote for mayor must be an absolute majority by show of hands in the chamber? I don't think you can't pull it out of a hat anymore, can you? Even if your governance rules says.
It might be the case. I'm trusting you on this, Chris. I haven't gone and done the research on that particular issue recently, but
someone will correct us. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong.
Someone will.
Yeah.
But of course, if they do come back and have another go at voting, then there's a good chance that Councillor Gilligan's suspension will have concluded by that point, and we then have a different situation in terms of the numbers.
So in that scenario, you might expect that he ends up back in the mayoralty, which is what happened at Bor, isn't it, last year when the mayor was suspended?
Yeah, exactly. So the same legislative provisions operated in relation to Councillor Danny Goss at Bor. However, Danny Goss was suspended for 21 days. So that meant that whilst his office of mayor became vacant, the mayoral election, which had to occur within 1 month or 30 days, was able to take place on the 22nd day, if you like, after the suspension. So Councillor Goss was able to participate at that mayoral election meeting. There was a call for nominations. Councillor Goss was in fact the only nominee and accepted the nomination, and therefore, took the office of mayor for the remainder of the term, was essentially, reappointed, if you like.
So, a question without notice, and you don't know what's in the minds of the arbiters when they make these rulings, but do you think they're aware of this particular nuance of the legislation when they impose a 30-day suspension on a mayor?
I wonder if they were, because I think it would lead to comment. For example, whilst I'm not ordering that the person cease to be the mayor, I'm aware that there'll be a mayoral election here, or that sort of observation one would think one would see in the arbiter report. But I think going forwards there will be. I don't doubt that arbiters follow the practical outcomes of their decisions, and I think that there will be that more understanding now that when a mayor is facing a code of conduct hearing or arbiter hearing, at least, then there will be some consciousness of the significant implications if there's a suspension.
Interesting. Sorry to put you on the spot there on
No,
a couple of
no, it's all
questions
right.
without notice. So there'll be more eyeballs than normal, I think, on the Wyndham Mayoral meeting next Wednesday. I think it's at 6 p.m, but the details will be on the council's website, which I understand they've got a new website coming, which will be good to see very soon. The other arbiter decisions, we don't want to spend too much time on these, but in both cases at Knox and Marybeck, council are suspended for 30 days. And once we just wrap this up very neatly, Tony, I've got a question to ask about the process of tabling arbiters' reports. But firstly, your thoughts on those particular two cases.
Yeah. So the Knox case, like the Wyndham case with Councillor Gilligan, related to, guess what, social media comments and posts. The Knox case was in relation to posts by Councillor Peter Lockwood, and really, again, just another example of the dangers of social media posts that criticise your councillor colleagues. These were posts made on Councillor Lockwood's Facebook page, along with reposts of, Council Watch, along with a Council Watch article, and etc. And the behaviour of Councillor Lockwood also in various council meetings was found to have had a detrimental impact on the safety and functioning of councils, and eroded public confidence in council. And there's a sort of cumulative effect of his behaviours that were found to have undermined the community perception of council. But the examples, just for people listening, some of the posts referred to the deputy mayor as being part of a clique at the council. There was a controversial decision of council around would they fund Christmas decorations, and Councillor Lockwood described a councillor at a public meeting as one of a pack of Grinches. The person having no heart, and that the Grinches had won in terms of the decision not to give financial support for Christmas decorations. So there was no apology. There was apology in part, but in relation to the use of the word Grinches and saying other councillors lacked heart. But the remainder of the allegations, Councillor Lockwood stood by.
Just to be clear, Tony, because some of the reporting on this has just focused on the use of the word Grinch and lack of heart, to say this is, over and above a heavy-handed use of the misconduct provisions, but it was more than that.
Yeah. Well, it was persistent conduct at a number of meetings throughout July, and as I say, only partial apologies offered at the actual arbiter hearing, and made on a Facebook page. Some of these comments made on a Facebook page titled "Councillor Peter Lockwood." So, understandably, the community would think made in performance of that role, and a failure to treat councillor colleagues with respect, and also reminding people about the risks of liking posts made by other individuals that are explicitly targeting other councillors. So Councillor Lockwood, as you say, was suspended for a month. The distinction between that case at Knox and the recent case at Marybeck involving Councillor Yildiz as the applicant and Councillor Iwasaki as the respondent is that the Marybeck case dealt with emails that Councillor Iwasaki sent that included imputations of improper behaviour by Councillor Yildiz, allegations of failures to declare conflicts of interest, and use of the words corrupt and corruption, the possibility of corruption in this proposal. It was about resurfacing the council spending money resurfacing a car park that serviced a club. The allegation being that Councillor Yildiz had some undeclared association with that club that created a material conflict of interest. In fact, he'd resigned his honorary life membership prior to the decisions being made. He'd always declared his role in his personal interest returns, and he actually made a conflict of interest declaration and
Right.
didn't participate in the decision.
Mm.
So clearly a lot of risks accusing publicly someone of a conflict of interest when you don't have the full evidence there, and there are other avenues available for councillors. Report it to the local government inspectorate, report it to IBAC if you think it's corruption, but there's not a need to make these sweeping public statements that have these negative imputations. The arbiter said that it was a serious allegation to suggest someone's potentially or actually corrupt, and despite being invited to do so, Councillor Iwasaki didn't provide any evidence at the hearing to back up his use of the word corruption. And so, and these were emails, for example, the email was sent to 26 recipients, Chris.
Yes, and
widely
a later
circulated.
clarification that only went to some of those, I think I read. And the other thing that jumped out at me, Tony, was clearly the relationships there are pretty tense. The arbiter described it as fractious and had to advise the parties to avoid making personal attacks and bringing in matters that were outside the scope of the application, which gives you a bit of an insight into perhaps what's been building there for some time.
Yeah, clearly, both parties were sort of criticised for seeking to bring in matters that weren't before Arbiter Simon Heath on that occasion or in that matter. But yeah, certainly a clear decision, a requirement for a written apology from Councillor Iwasaki, but also an apology and withdrawal addressed to the recipients of the email, and then another 1 month suspension, which seems to be it's like the AFL football 1 week one week rubbed out type thing. Seems to be the go-to.
Yeah. All right, all of those decisions are online. In 2 cases, you were able to read that report as part of the agenda papers before it was tabled. In one case, in the Wyndham case, and this is my question, without wanting to spend too much time on this, Tony, most councils put an arbiter report into the agenda papers before it actually comes to the council for tabling. Wyndham didn't. It just mentioned there was a confidential report that would be tabled at the meeting, and it became part of the public record after the fact. Some people are asking, is that actually in the spirit of the legislation or allowable? And I understand it is allowable because the Act only requires the report to be tabled with the minutes. Is that right?
Yeah, so it probably would be good as we look at legislative reforms, and we know that some are on the horizon, Chris, that we got some better clarification of what amounts to a tabling. Certainly in the parliaments, someone can stand up, a parliamentarian, and say, I tabled this bit of paper, and it then goes in the transcript. And so that is essentially what has occurred at Wyndham. It has not appeared in the agenda paper and the attachments to the agenda paper, such that anyone watching that meeting online, anyone preparing for that meeting or reading the minutes wouldn't have got to read the decision. Sorry, not reading the minutes, reading the agenda paper, wouldn't have got to read the arbiter decision. Wait 3 or 4 days after the meeting itself, the minutes were then published, and that was where the decision was in fact tabled, Chris. So I think it's been keeping with the strict letter of the law, but we'd probably say from a transparency perspective, makes it a little harder for the community to know exactly what happened, because they're forced to keep going back and to wait until the minutes themselves are published before they actually get the decision.
It also means no media coverage leading up to the meeting, which, good thing, bad thing, that can be for others to debate. But generally, the whole the details of the matter get exposed online and in press reports ahead of the council having the opportunity to table that report, which might be some of the reasoning why it was done that way.
Yeah. And I'm not saying Wyndham did it wrong, because I think they've followed the law and they probably got advice on it. But yeah, it'd be a nice one to get a little bit of clarification given there are two different practices occurring out there.
Yes, yeah. I think just to underscore that, I think clearly it's not wrong. It's allowable to do it that way. It's just a little bit different to what most seem to do with those reports. Tony, that's been a bit more meaty than I thought we would be doing this week with the Hepburn matter coming out. Thank you for your thoughts on all of those, as always. We've got lots more to talk about. We might have to get you back next week to catch up on some legislative reform and some other matters that are doing the rounds.
That'd be fun, Chris. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Tony. Tony Raunic from Hunt & Hunt Lawyers with us here on VLGA Connect. Well, that's just about it for this week's edition of VLGA Connect. Before I go, I want to tell you about an upcoming member-exclusive lunch and learn session from the VLGA. This is happening on Friday, the 27th of March from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. It's a free event for members exploring psychosocial hazards and the council's role as the CEO's employer. The VLGA's head of local government programs and policy, Dawn Bray, and managing partner from Justicia Lawyers, Melissa Scadden, will break down the responsibilities of councillors under an emerging piece of legislation, which is all about understanding the impact of culture, workload and role clarity and ensuring appropriate systems of support and accountability are in place. As I said, that's coming up on Friday, the 27th of March. The details are on the events page of the VLGA website. Head to vlga.org.au to find out more about that member-exclusive lunch and learn session. That's it for this week's edition of VLGA Connect. My thanks to Tony Raunic and the team at Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for their ongoing support of VLGA Connect. Also to Murrundindi Mayor Damien Gallagher and Northern Grampians CEO Brent McAlister, my guests on the program today. Much more for you next week when we return with another edition of VLGA Connect. Bye for now.